Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, my name is Tom Ryden, and I'm here with the New Warehouse podcast. I want to talk a little bit about a safety trip. So when you're in a warehouse and you're deploying robots, one of the things you have to think about is the junction points where robots and traditional vehicles like forklifts come together. Don't forget that the robots can't necessarily see around the corner, especially if forklifts are traveling at a high speed. So you want to set up some way that the robots are aware of the forklifts and other vehicles coming, and so that they can automatically slow down.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Tom Ryden, who is the Executive Director at MassRobotics. And MassRobotics is helping robotics companies grow and helping the robotics industry grow as a whole and come together and collaborate and ensure that the future of robotics is a collaborative effort and making sure that things are going smoothly in that area and just helping companies get off the ground as well in the robotics space. Now, we've talked about MassRobotics previously with Daniel from Vecna Robotics, but Tom is the executive director over there, so he's going to give us a little more information about that. And we're also going to talk about some recent news from them, which are these interoperability standards, which really are helping different robotics companies with different solutions being able to work together and be in the same operation together. So Tom is going to give us the better explanation of that and all the details. So Tom, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm definitely happy to have you on. You know, I mentioned I've spoken to Daniel before at Vecna, and obviously he's very involved. I think he's actually kind of just recently taken on a bigger role with MassRobotics as well, right?
Yeah, so Daniel is one of the co-founders. MassRobotics is an independent nonprofit. We were really formed through a number of folks from the robotics industry looking for help in a couple of different ways, but really about, as you mentioned earlier, bringing the robotics community together, helping advocate for the use and deployment of robots, and then helping startups really get engaged in the space.
Definitely, yeah, and it's great things that you're doing for the industry, and helping, like you said, helping these startups get along too. And obviously, I mentioned on the show multiple times, but yeah, there in Massachusetts, it's just kind of like this robotics hub. So it's really cool that you guys are based there, and that you're able to bring these companies together in a collaborative effort to help the industry move forward as a whole. And it's not such like necessarily, it doesn't seem like this crazy like competitive environment. I guess it's a very cool thing.
Right. Yep. They're obviously a lot of these companies compete, but they also realize that working together on certain things like the standard can help the industry as a whole, and that's going to benefit their companies individually.
Definitely, without a doubt. So tell me a little bit, I guess, about how did you end up at MassRobotics? What's kind of your background, and how did you get into this space?
Yeah, so I've been in the robotics industry for a long time. I was with iRobot. I joined them when they were a small company above a donut shop just outside of MIT, and stayed through their IPO. Great ride, a lot of fun. I went off to do another startup doing telepresence robots, so mobile video conferencing type of robots. Okay. That company was acquired, and then I was kind of sitting around saying, well, what am I going to do next? And these folks came and said, hey, you're not doing anything. Why don't you come and help us out with this nonprofit? And that was like 5, or maybe almost 6 years ago. And it's been a fun ride. That's for sure. MassRobotics, we do a lot of different things, but we also run an innovation center in downtown Boston that houses now 65 startups. And it's just fun to see all of the different companies, what they're doing, and how they're developing their products and addressing different challenges through robotics. I would say probably about a third of our companies are involved in manufacturing and warehouse in some fashion, picking and AMRs and other things like that. So it's a big segment of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And yeah, I mean, it's really great the things that you guys are doing. And you mentioned you guys are a nonprofit. So I'm curious, how does the funding come to you guys? Yeah.
That's a great question. We are funded kind of 3 ways. We take a small fee from the startups that are housed in our facility. It's not significant relative to the rent. So if you had to go out and rent this type of space, you'd be paying a lot more. And we provide a lot of other resources just in space. We provide robots and software and a lot of things. We also have corporate partners, and they really help us carry out our mission. And so folks like iRobot and Amazon Robotics, FedEx, as an example, is a sponsor, GM. And these folks are really helpful because their funding really allows us to go and do things such as the standard and some of the other work that we do.
Wow, very interesting, and some big names there too as sponsors. That's good stuff. Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious to know, you guys been doing this, you said 5 or 6 years. So, what are some of the maybe success stories that people may be familiar with that have kind of come through the MassRobotics Innovation Center? You said, right?
Yeah. So when we started, we had one of our first companies was American Robotics. They started with 2 folks in our facility early on. They eventually moved out, and they just got acquired for, I think it was $76 million. Not bad. A great exit for them. Real-time robotics, same kind of story. They started with us with about 3 or 4. They now have 60 employees. They just closed on a round of $34 million. Wow. And they do high-speed motion planning, which will really accelerate the ability to have these mobile manipulation opportunities like in warehouses where you can have AMRs with arms being able to do this picking around humans. It's really some neat software. So we've had some great successes. And then the industry as a whole, as you know, is growing like crazy as well. So, we did a lot of work with Locust. They became one of the first unicorns in Massachusetts in robotics with their latest funding round. So it's been great to see some of the successes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like you said, the industry is moving so fast and just growing so much. And, the funding that's coming in, it's obvious that, this is the future of the industry and where things are heading. And, robotics are just going to continue to grow, in what capacity we'll see, obviously, what the future holds. But definitely going all out. And I think, in contrast to probably 5 or 6 years ago when you guys were getting started with this thing, robots were still kind of a little scary to people, I think, and now it's like,
Yep. I think the biggest change has been kind of on the funding and the VC side. When I went out and I raised some money for my previous company, and then even as 5 years ago, you'd go into a VC and they'd like, well, we don't really have anybody who follows the robotics industry. So, it'll take some time for us to get up to speed.
Yeah.
It's hardware, all the kind of the things you might expect. Nowadays, you walk into a lot of the firms and they go, oh, yeah, you got to talk to so-and-so. He's our robotics guy. We've made investments here, here, and here. We understand the space. And it really shortens the investment cycle because, they don't have to get up to speed. They already know that. And then there's also VCs that are particularly focused on this industry. And even in the warehouse side, we have a couple VC firms that are just doing those types of investments. And that's really been a great change.
Interesting. Yeah. It's been interesting to see how it grows, and especially through doing the podcast in the last 2 years or so, like even getting more familiar with the technology and stuff. And, I'm a warehouse manager by career, and, being able to see these things grow from when I started like 10 years ago is pretty wild. So it's pretty crazy what's out there now. So you mentioned also, so we've been talking, I guess, a little bit from the solution side, but, there's also the solution end user, right, that's using these things. So you mentioned you guys help with deployment a little bit as well. So I think you have some deployment tips that you'd like to share, which I think are pretty interesting, actually, one of them we talked about off mic a little bit, but yeah, share some deployment tips for us, for those that are listening and who are,
Sure.
Thinking about bringing robots in.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I'll cover just a couple, but happy to do, maybe more in the future. I think we're seeing as warehouses who have never deployed robots start to look at AMRs and other mobile platforms. We kind of have seen some of these go through the trials and paces. Example, of course, you need really good Wi-Fi coverage. And a lot of warehouses don't have that. So expect time to install that and make sure that works well. Silly things like the floor. It's, you probably are used to folks, your pickers pushing carts. And if there's a hole or something like that, not a problem. They'll go around it or whatever. You want to make sure that those issues aren't there for the robots. They are robust, but still, look at ramps and so forth, making sure that those are relatively smooth so that the robots can move at the speed that they want and without getting stuck. Some sensors are better than others, and some might view that hole, what you see as something small, as a bigger, and stop and wait until you guide it around it. And then also just really engage with the workers. A lot of times we see workers have done things specifically around the way they pick. And they've got little tricks that they do that sometimes people aren't, the managers might not be aware of. And so when they deploy a robot and they say, well, this robot will replace this section of what you do, this piece of what you do. And a lot of times we're, well, yeah, but the cart also carries my tape gun and my RFD and my lunch and whatever else. Do you have a spot for all of that? And then last tip, of course, is get the workers involved in naming them. Almost every facility I've been in, they name their robots, which is great. But having the workers take part in that, coming up with the naming scheme is always a lot of fun. I don't know if you saw, Amazon recently released a short video about some of their new robots that they're working on. Yeah. And they named them after Sesame Street characters. There's Kermit and whatever. And interesting naming scheme. Everybody comes up with unique ones, but yeah, it's a fun way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that last one is really interesting because there's, like we mentioned, there's a little bit of a, skepticism and scariness around robots, especially if you have never dealt with them. I mean, like you said, are they going to take my job, this and that? And so being able to give them a little bit of a persona and make them like a little more human, I think is a good thing, especially for the culture and the operation, and it makes it a little fun too as well. So so I really appreciate those deployment tips because I think, a lot of people, as we mentioned, the industry is growing so fast. A lot of people are pushing towards now bringing in robots and exploring robots, and they may have never done anything like that before. So it's good to get all the information that they can possibly get. So we talked about the collaborativeness and the collaborative effort that kind of MassRobotics is a little bit of the I guess, a catalyst for, especially in the Massachusetts robotics scene, I guess, robotics world, whatever you guys call it up there. Recently you guys came out with these interoperability standards, which we mentioned a little bit early in the show, but this is a pretty big deal, I think, for the robot world. So tell us, I guess, first, just, tell us a high overview. What are interoperability standards and what are they accomplishing?
Yeah, let me start by just saying a little bit about the need. Why now? Some of these warehouse robots have been out for a while, but I think what we're starting to see is a number of different types of robots being deployed in the same facility at the same time. And so you might have an autonomous tugger or forklift. You might have the traditional, I shouldn't say traditional, but the normal warehouse AMRs that are moving goods. You might even have a floor cleaner. And if they're all operating on the same space and all want to go down that same aisle, or they get to a choke point at the same time, that can really slow your process. So right now, there is no way for these robots to communicate with each other. So the idea was, well, let's make a common set of data available for all these different platforms so that some upper level software can understand where all these robots are and then start to understand their flow and their movement and maybe help direct the robots so that they can better be utilized in the facility. So this standard is kind of a first step. We're really asking that each of the manufacturers make available certain data, a common set of data from their platforms that, as I said, can be used by others to understand how these robots are flowing in their facilities.
Yeah, very interesting. So, I mean, it sounds like it's really all about, I guess, communication between the different solutions and making it easier for the end user to have multiple solutions within their operation, which I think is inevitable anyway, because you have, some companies, they're just focusing on picking. Some companies are just focusing on put away, or some focus are just focusing on tugging or something like that.
Right.
So ultimately, at some point, as we grow as an industry and operations get more automated, you're going to end up with multiple companies under one roof, right? So how difficult, or maybe how not difficult, was it to get this together and get these companies on the same page, really?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, at the beginning it was a little challenging because obviously a lot of these guys are focused on what they're doing in their deployments, and they all have their own fleet managers. So, if they're deploying 100 units in a warehouse, they have a fleet manager that manages that entire fleet. And they didn't necessarily want somebody to come in and disrupt that. And we understood that. What we tried to do early on was bring in a couple of the large customers to talk to some of the manufacturers and say, this is what we're seeing. This is why this is important. Can you help us? And I think once we did that, then we saw a lot more traction with the companies. On the whole, everybody's been really supportive, and they've been really digging in and saying, okay, we have this data available. What do you guys have? Okay, let's make this available. Let's make sure that if every robot doesn't have the same set of data, that they're not precluded from participating in the standard. They can make available what they have. And then we started to work through some of the really tougher issues around how do you define, everything from like the physical size and payload of your warehouse robot. Don't forget, you might have a forklift that can move 3,000 pounds, or you might have a little robot that's only moving 20 pounds. You want to understand that, as well as, how are you projecting where you're going to be? What kind of information can when you get? We recognized also that coming up with a common map at least at this stage, is really challenging. Most of these warehouse robots the ones that are, the AMRs, not necessarily the AGVs, but more on the AMR side, they will create their own map. They will carry their sensors and build their own map. And to come up with a common map, we thought at this stage was really challenging. So we came up with reference points so that someone could understand where each of the robots are and then create a separate map that displays that. So we worked through a lot of those issues. We've been at it for about a year and a half, and this is our release 1.0, and we're excited to get it out there and have people start using it.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think it's a great thing for the industry as a whole. And as you mentioned, I'm sure the bigger customers that came in and talked to them are certainly already at that point where they're looking at bringing in multiple solutions. So they need them to be able to work together, which I think makes total sense. So, what kind of, I guess it was recently released. So, what kind of, I guess, reception from the industry has there been already? And has there already been like some success stories from being able to be on the same page like this with the standards?
Yeah, so right now the response has been great. We've had a lot of people download the information on how to implement the standard and kind of the fact sheets around that, which is great. It's still early on. It's only been out for a couple of weeks. So, I can't say that anybody's publicly said, oh, yeah, we've got it and whatever. We were hoping that's going to happen.
Yeah.
We are excited about a big trial that has been announced that FedEx will be doing at their facility, one of their facilities down in Memphis, where they'll be utilizing, I think, 3 different vendors of AMRs on exactly what we're talking about in the same kind of facility. And they're working through a grant that they received from the Arm Institute that's helping fund some of this work. And there's other partners. I think Vecna's on there and Waypoint. I can't remember the other platform they're using. Siemens is also involved in that. So that's really what I think will be the first big test of it. And we'll see how that works. That's going to come out this fall. So
okay. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that develops. I think I saw something on LinkedIn about that announcement actually with the FedEx. So it'd be really interesting to see how that works out. And I do hope that the companies come out publicly and say they're using this now as well. And I'm curious, from a customer standpoint, when they're looking for these solutions, do you think that the standards and whether or not the companies have adopted these standards are going to come into play for a purchasing decision?
Yeah, we do, and we hope that will be the case as more of these standards get deployed and implemented. There's, for folks who deploy this standard on their robot, there's a little tag that basically says that is AMR interoperability enabled. Okay. And so the customers will know that they can receive a certain set of information from these platforms. And we hope that buying decisions in the future will say, hey, do you have that sticker? Are you enabled? Because we want to run different platforms. But this, as I said, is a first step, and we're working with other organizations. A3 is doing a great job at looking at other areas that can be addressed by standards. This does not take into account batteries and battery charging, which comes up a lot of times as well. People ask about that. If I deploy 3 or 4 different manufacturers, that means I have 3 or 4 different charging stations.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And they take up floor space. And so where do you put them? There's a cost to installing them, a cost to having them on the floor place. Wouldn't it make sense if there could be 1 or 2 standard type of chargers that everybody uses? So, a lot of that. But if you think about your laptop, and I have 2 laptops and both have totally different chargers. They have different plugs. They don't work together. And it seems stupid. Now, they're from 2 different vendors, but it's like, oh, you guys couldn't have standardized on that. It's, because I'm inevitably grabbing the wrong charger. We certainly understand that that's going to be a hard one, but I think there'll be a lot of work in those type of areas coming soon. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's, for me, from my perspective, and I mean, I guess I'm more on a user side, I guess you would say, but it makes total sense, because I think even as the solution provider, even if you're trying to, I guess, remain competitive a little bit in a sense, like there's going to be some gaps that you're not going to be able to fill, and if you're not able to coexist with some other solution, especially if that customer already has the other solution implemented, they're not going to want to overhaul. So I think it makes total sense to get on board with the standards and help move the industry forward as a whole. And you keep moving the industry forward, it only means, the more potential customers that are out there and operations that are going to start adopting these technologies and putting them in place. Yeah. So,
yeah, and we talk, obviously we're focused at AMRs right now, but also think of all of the other things within a facility,
right.
Conveyor belts, as we talked about, a little picking robots. All of those will want to work and interoperate together so that, something coming down the conveyor belt might trigger a tugger to go to a certain location and trigger other things. And just understanding all of that movement, I think, will be helpful.
Yeah, without a doubt. Needs to kind of orchestrate and being moving as a whole within the operation and throughout the whole flow. So you mentioned this is the 1.0 version.
Yep.
Right. So how do you think, or how are you guys maybe predicting or hoping how this will, I guess, start to grow and expand over the coming months or coming years, whatever the horizon looks like?
Yeah, so this may sound counterintuitive, but my hope is that people will start using it and go, hey, you forgot. You didn't do this. How come? Right. Yeah. And really drives the discussion around what should we do and what should we include? How should we expand it? So we recognize that. We're looking for feedback. We don't, we're not out there saying this is a perfect solution. We're saying let's get the discussion started and take in this feedback and continue to improve it. So we encourage people who want to get involved to let us know. On our website, there's a way to connect, both to get the standard, but also to connect and indicate that you're interested in participating.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. And, I'm curious to see how it will move the industry forward even faster than it's been moving, and also how it will grow. And, I think it's also, like you mentioned, you're hoping that people will say like, oh, you left something out or you forgot this. And, in that sense, it's encouraging the collaboration even more, which is a great thing as well. So really interesting stuff. And, I'm curious from your perspective, Tom, what do you think the future of robotics, like in the next 3 to 5 years, looks like specifically in the material handling space?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about two kind of really developments. One is obviously collaborative robots. We know about that, but the interaction between humans and robots and the programming of these devices and the way they're being simplified. So if you look today at most industrial arms, you get a pendant, you have to program it. You need to be pretty well educated to understand how to program that. And we're seeing a lot of really cool developments around combining AI and other VR, AR types of technology that allow a worker to reprogram it. And so maybe I'm picking these items today and I want to put, 12 in a box, and tomorrow I'm doing something totally different. And, the worker on the floor can have that robot repack it, repurposed essentially for a new task. And same with the AMRs and the routes they're doing and all of that. And I think that's just going to add an incredible amount of flexibility to the warehouses, but also increase productivity quite a bit. So
interesting. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And the flexibility, is a great thing always in the warehouse, to be flexible. You have to be.
Right. You have to be.
Yep. Yeah. But I think that's really interesting insight, especially addressing, that kind of, I think that lingering question that's always like hanging in the air about robots and how do people, fit into the situation with robots. And so it's good to hear, you think that it'll make their lives better. It sounds like, by having that flexibility and being able to work with them more. So right. Yeah. So very good stuff. And the standards, it is a great thing. So I really appreciate you, coming on and talking to us about it and explaining it as well, and kind of what the future holds. So Tom, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, but how can people find out more information about MassRobotics and get access to these new standards?
Yep. So if you go to our website, which is massrobotics.org, and we have a tab right there for the AMR standard. And then we also have information on the other things that we do. Encourage you to do that. And as I said, there's a contact us information there as well. So
Okay, great. And we'll put all that information on thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can navigate there if they go to the website. So, Tom, I want to thank you again for your time today, and I can't wait to find out how this grows and see what the standards have in store for the future, and I'm sure we'll connect again.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.